you reverse engineer backwards.
Right.
Would you say that this, in addition to that spread and dragging down the countries around it, could be similar to that environment where jihadists can openly plan, recruit, train, whatever they want to do?
I don't think it's certainly possible, but I think it's too easy to overstate that threat. For one thing, so far the groups that are involved are really focused on local issues and aren't interested in the global jihad. You know, like, so JNIM, for example, has said very clearly that they have no beef with France. They just want to kick France out, right? Now, at some point, maybe after they've conquered Mali, then maybe they start to get more aggressive and more interested. So I think that maybe kind of in the long term, yes. Although I would say that this threat does happen more when as it starts to affect more the littoral countries and the big cities. So it's a distant threat, which matters if you're trying to prioritize where your threats coming from. But I don't think it's Afghanistan in the 1990s, because you don't, for one thing, the relationship between these groups and, let's say, Al-Qaeda Central, such that that still exists, is really very distant and remote. It's more like a franchise, right?
Licensing, perhaps, they have more operating ability than a franchisee, less boundaries.
You're right. Right. So, but they're not under direct command and control, and I think that's an important thing. And I don't think it's a question of like Al-Qaeda Central moving its chess pieces across the board in some vast game to destroy the West. I don't think that's happening at all, in part because we've done so much damage to Al-Qaeda Central that even if that mentality or that intent existed, I think it's gone. Like, they don't have that capability.
Yeah,
if it ever
like they're more aligning ideologically or picking, what would be the best way to describe it? They're picking the uniform that most closely aligns with what they feel attached with. They may not share the overarching goal of, Al-Qaeda, ISIS at the very top. They see a shade of that and they're picking that uniform because it closely enough aligns. But yeah, at the tactical level, they don't have any interest in the strategic goals of ISIS or Al-Qaeda.
I think that's correct. I mean, the real concern is more certainly with ISIS or Islamic State in the Sahel province, or whatever, there are different names that go about.
Whatever I fill in the blank in the area.
IS something. Yeah. The IS something in the Sahel region is very dangerous in that it's nihilistic, and JNIM also seems to be nihilistic in the sense that they're destroying, they're not building. And I almost look back with nostalgia to when there used to be these like communist rebel groups, insurgents in countries, because the communist rebel groups, for all their flaws, which they had many, at least had this like positive vision of wanting to build a society that would have involved schools and daycare centers and hospitals. They wanted to build rather than to destroy.
Yeah.
Whereas these groups, I look at them like, you guys just want to destroy. There's no positive vision here, because I guess for a jihadist, the perfect society, like, you're basically deferring happiness for the next life rather than this life. So this life is all about being miserable and austere, and that's what's going to buy you happiness in the next life. So they're just sort of destroying, and they're just taking apart what remains of these states. And so they're just eviscerating everybody and just making everybody more poor, and they're just reversing development. The terrorist threat, I think I would want to be careful with that. I think that it's less so. I think that there is this long-term danger. So, for instance, there's this danger that as the sort of jihadism also anchors itself more in the populations, let's say in the littoral region, or, like maybe in Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire or whatnot, then you have a problem in Europe. You've got like Senegalese diaspora and Ivorian diaspora and all these people. Like, the greater the diaspora is, then there's also sort of this concern of like the contagion kind of spreading. And sometimes I perceive amongst the French, and I deal a lot with the French military and with the French think tankers and whatnot. And I often pick up indications that there's this unspoken fear of an Islamist insurgency there. It's not spoken, it's not voiced, but it's like I run into these like hints that like that's like the worst case scenario. The it doesn't exist, right? Just to be clear, it's not happening. But the greater these parts of these African populations become infected with this sort of nihilistic jihadism, the greater the risk to Europe itself, and then theoretically also to the United States.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of danger that you're looking at, but it's like a long-term sort of danger.